Not to interrupt, this is Dan, but I said in those, my computer is, I just got a different computer first day with it. It's about to restart in like 14 minutes and I can't stop it. So if I'm out for a little bit, that's what happened. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sure that will probably happen right when you're giving the Bowser update too. That will be excellent.
That would be my guess. Fortunately, you have Barb to cover me.
Dan, did you see my husband and I driving by the other day with a giant blue tree in the back of our truck? You were walking your dog and you kind of gave us a weird look.
You know, yeah. I remember you going by, and I'm trying to remember now if I saw you walking or driving, but yeah, I think it was driving. Why did you have a blue tree?
It was a prayer tree for church that we were driving slowly over from our backyard to the church, and then I saw you and I was like, there's Dan Fabian. He's giving us a really weird look. He's probably wondering why we have this giant tree in the back of the truck.
Well, I didn't notice you waving, but I thought that was you going by.
By the giant blue tree, probably.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so welcome everyone. Okay, and Matt is on care duty for surgery recovery patients, so he may need to run in and out. I assume that by now all of you are familiar with how to use Zoom, but just in case it is not a platform you've all been using, there is the little chat feature down in the bottom that you can click on to be able to write notes to people. And that works well if you have a bad internet connection too. If it seems like you're going in and out, then you can use that. And let's go ahead and do a round of introductions, just because it's been a long time since this group got together and there are a few new people who haven't been part of this group in the past. And since we show up differently on everybody's screen, I might just go ahead and call on you in the order that I see you on my screen to make the introductions go a little bit quicker. And if you could say who you are, what organization you're with, and maybe just because the fall's been kind of a bummer so far, just something nice and happy to put us in a good mood at the beginning of this meeting. So my name's Angie Hong. I coordinate the East Metro Water Resource Education Program for partners that are outside of Washington County. That includes all of the watersheds, Washington SWCD, the Washington County, and several of the cities, including Lake Elmo, who is here present today. And my nice thing to share, Carpenter Nature Center, if you've never been there before, it's just north of Hastings on the St. Croix River. Beautiful fall colors right now. They have delicious apples. I just went down and I got Zesters and Sweet Tango, and there's no crowds. So I highly recommend apples from Carpenter. And the next person I see is Tiffany.
Tiffany Detterman with Isanti Soil and Water Conservation District, and I got a new puppy this fall.
That's the best update.
Betsy.
I see Christina Hant next.
Christina Hant, I'm the city administrator in Lake Elmo, and I'm involved in this process because of some direction made by the state group for the Lower St. Croix watershed infrastructure funding that we'll talk about later today. So that's why I'm joining folks. My happy related to fall, I suppose, would be we've got a lot of apples off our apple tree, and I'm really excited that my 5-year-old has learned how to peel them. So that saves me a lot of arm muscles or arm effort. So that's what we've been doing this fall.
Awesome. This is
welcome, Christina.
Yeah,
thank you.
This is the time of year when all Minnesotans go apple crazy. Twyla, I see you next on my screen. Go ahead. I don't think you're muted. Oh,
I wasn't muted.
Nope.
I'm Twyla Hill. I'm the new district technician here in Pine County, SWCD. And my happy story is I accepted an offer on my condo last night.
Woo.
So let's hope that that all goes well.
All right. Well, welcome to the group. Dan, you're drinking coffee and you're next.
I'm drinking tea.
Tea.
Tea, and I'm next. I'm Dan Fabian. I'm the board conservationist with the Board of Water and Soil Resources. I cover, let's see now, Isanti, Chisago, Anoka, and Washington counties in that. So I live in Stillwater, obviously not too far from Angie in that, since she drives by all the time. Let's see, what's my happy, I think I finally finished limestone block retaining wall putting it back up that had fell down in that's taken me all summer. And it's only like 4 feet high and 10 feet long, but it's done. I'm happy about that. Now, if I can get to painting my garage before winter, that'd be great. So.
Awesome. Jay, you're up next.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jay Riggs, the district manager of the Washington Conservation District. Gosh, I've been able to get out a lot lately, and then I've been able to get back on my motorcycle because now I have 2 opposable thumbs again, which is glorious. I sliced this flexor tendon in July, like middle of July or something, and so now I can do this again. So it's great. Surgery is pretty amazing. That's the one thing we'd probably really miss if society crumbles is hand surgeons, because those won't come back on. I also had an interesting situation last night. I have live traps set up for flying squirrels because I have a family that's lodged in my house, and I've captured 9 so far this year. And live captured, released ethically. And I thought I got one last night because I heard the trap, but then the trap started making lots of noise in the middle of the night last night. And this morning, when I finally woke up, I went outside and discovered that it had been dragged into my wetlands. So I think a raccoon or something got into the trap and then just kind of walked away with it for a while. So that was interesting. It was hard to find the trap.
All right. Craig, you're next.
Craig Mell, Chisago Sound Water Conservation District Manager. Enjoy working from home because my view out my back is of a really pretty maple forest right now, and it's reds and yellows and orange. And next week I have the week off on vacation just to spend time outdoors, which I love to do. So those are my 2 happy things.
Fabulous. Barb, you want to go next?
Sure. Barb Peichel, Bowser, and I'll just say my daughter has been mandating some living room dance parties, so that has helped me loosen up a bit.
Let's see, Susanna.
Hi, Susanna Wilson-Witkowski with Chisago County Water Resource Manager. And happy things. Well, we live in North Branch, and our oldest turns 13 on Tuesday. And he joined cross country this year, and he has a meet at home on his birthday. So that will be a happy day for him. Another happy thing is we're closing. We refinanced and we're closing this afternoon.
Awesome.
So
okay.
Good thing.
Yeah. Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Eisensee, the administrator with the Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District. Happy things. We painted the outside of our house in 2 weekends. Both of my kids, 13 and 15, were a huge help, and I can't believe we got it done. And my daughter and I have almost completed the first leg of the Spear Hiking Trail. We're just, the next run, we should be hiking into Duluth. So that's been fun.
Fun. All right, Derek, you're up next.
Derek Wodachek, Isanti County Zoning Office, represent water planner, wetland specialist, and a couple other hats for the county. So I kind of refer to myself as a jack of all trades, master of none. A couple of happy thoughts. We actually canoed a portion of the St. Croix River this year, and my 7-year-old caught his first couple of smallmouth bass out of the St. Croix. So that's exciting. This fall, my older 2 sons joined the Cambridge Isanti fishing team this year and entered our first bass tournament on Lake Minnetonka last weekend, placed 4th, largest stringer of largemouth bass by 3/4 of an inch. We lost first place by. So that was a close and fun match with those involved in that tournament. And Labor Day weekend, we also canoed the Rum River sectors between Highway 47 and the city of Cambridge. And the older two sons completed the Rum River triple slam, I call it, with largemouth, smallmouth, and northern pike. So it was an exciting trip down both rivers this year, and I'm excited to be a part of the One Watershed, One Plan for both rivers and see what we can do.
Awesome.
I nominate Derek to lead the One Watershed, One Plan fishing expedition.
I'll be the guide.
I second that.
No kidding.
Fishing holes not disclosed.
I know, I'm like, oh, I do lots of canoeing, but we never catch anything.
It's a struggle. If you guys have kids, I recommend brushing up on your paddling skills, because the adult does most of the paddling, trying to get snags out and go against the current and all kinds of fun other things. But I did catch a few fish myself, and it was fun seeing the kids get a lot of fish on both rivers this year. So
Awesome. All right, Maureen, you want to go next?
Hi, Marie Hoffman with Washington County Public Health. I have not caught any fish, so I cannot compete with that. But I recently ordered a projector that just came so we can have outdoor movie nights. So that's exciting.
Cool. Let's see, Matt Downing, you're still there.
Yes, I'm still here. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm having
Yes.
connection issues. Okay. I'm going to leave the video off to see if that helps. I'm Matt Downing with Middle St. Croix WMO. What's my happy fall thing? I'll go apples too, although I don't know how happy I am about it, because I think I'm on 300 pounds processed from our trees.
Whoa.
So I'm getting a little tired of it, but lots of jam and jelly and applesauce and cider and turnovers and whatever the heck else that I've been making, I cannot remember. So
That's cool.
good problem to have, I guess.
Yeah. All right, Caleb, we can't see your tractor anymore, but are you still there?
I am. I took off video for connection issues as well.
Yeah, you sound better.
Good. So my happiest thing, well, I'm Caleb Anderson with Pine County Planning and Zoning Department. And for about the past 5 years, I've had a 1-hour commute each way to my office. And this fall, they moved my office to Sandstone. So I cut it down 25 minutes each way. So that has been very nice for quality of life. And it's been good for our service to folks, because Sandstone is more in the middle of the county as opposed to Pine City, which is on the south end.
Cool. Okay, Karen, are you there?
Yes. I am indeed. I also have some connections issues on this, so I'm going to be talking here from my phone, but I can hear and see everyone else just fine. I'm Karen Kill with Browns Creek Watershed District, and we currently with fall have 3 children, all at a different school. We have an elementary, a middle, and a high school, and my happy fall moment is that they are all independently working on their school right now while I am having this Zoom meeting, which is really a happy thought, because it's not been that way for the last couple of weeks so much. So
wow,
that's a very happy
I'm
thought.
supremely impressed.
Yeah, I'm not sure it has anything to do with me, but it's great. And one of our other family adventures, ironically, being with Browns Creek Watershed District, we've had a Browns Creek State Trail, the DNR Trail, for about 6 years now, and I finally this fall got my entire family to actually bike the entirety of that trail with me for the first time, and they were adequately impressed. That was great. So I think we'll be doing that more this fall as well.
Excellent. Emily.
Hi, Emily Hines. I'm the technician for Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. T-minus 37 days to Halloween, everybody. And thinking of scary things, I'm reading a book that I think is kind of scary. It's Jurassic Park, which I'm sure a lot of people have already read, but it's my first time through and it is such a good book. I can't wait to watch the movie.
Awesome.
So Emily, how's the weather out there today?
Better. We had a fire in a canyon. They closed off a big area just a couple miles from my house. For those who don't know, I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've been working remotely for a long time since COVID happened, so this hasn't been too much of a shakeup for me personally. But yeah, that's one of the not so great things about fall is forest fires.
Yeah. Mike Kinney, are you there?
Yep, I am. Mike Kinney with Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. I guess we're on a happy fall theme.
Yep. We're trying to cheer ourselves up.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to organize getting a small amount of concrete done since early May, and I finally got it done last Saturday. So I can kind of move on with some other projects. And so the weather, though dry, has been very conducive for doing a lot of projects, which I like to do.
Awesome. Jamie, I think you're the last one.
Oh, okay. Jamie Sherban with the Anoka Conservation District and also with the Sunrise River WMO. I am enjoying working from my deck today. And happy thoughts. We've been enjoying fall. My kids have been out catching crayfish, so I will close this with a dad joke. Why don't crayfish share? They just don't share. If you put a bunch together, because they're shellfish.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
He loves a dad joke.
All right. Yep. I'm going to share that with my son because he was catching crayfish on the Namakagon this summer and yeah, still talking about it. Yep. Okay. So I will briefly review what the agenda is for today. Everybody able to see my screen okay? Okay, so it's a rather short agenda, but superficially it appears short, but it will, I'm sure, actually take us quite a bit of time to get through the conversation. We want to start with updates on the status of the One Watershed One plan process, the timeline, and the next steps. The steering committee hasn't actually got together for several months, so you know, just want to know where we're at and what the next couple of months are going to look like. Craig and Jamie will talk about just quickly an update needed to the Joint Powers Agreement. And then the big conversation topic will be to look at the budget and decide which of the implementation actions are the ones that we would like to fund with the watershed-based implementation funds in 2021 and 2022. So, are there any additions that people want to make to this agenda or anything that you want to ask now before we get going?
Angie, we do have 2 new participants in the meeting today. So I'm wondering, as a part of the update, we can just do just a basic summary of the process, where we started. Unless Twyla and Christina, you do not want to spend the 5 minutes or whatever it would take to go through that.
It would be helpful for me if it's short and doesn't disrupt things.
Okay, let's see then if I could lickety-split be able to talk and find at the same time, because I can probably find the presentation that I gave at the community stakeholder engagement meetings earlier this year, and that would be a real quick way to refresh where we've gone and are going to. Okay, I think I have arrived there.
That was pretty smooth, Angie. Thank you.
I know. So now we just have to wait for the PowerPoint to open up. It's a little bit slow. So the One Watershed One planning process began, 2.5 years ago now. And the group has been slowly working through identifying what priority concerns, resources, potential projects are in the Lower St. Croix area. And, okay, now I have to stop talking while I share my screen again.
I can fill the silence just for like a couple seconds, Angie. One of the things I also wanted to mention for those who weren't involved at the beginning of this process is that when we filled out the application to be one of the pilot communities, we had a very small budget because we recognized how many plans were already completed within the Lower St. Croix with the TMDL and all the county water plans and all the local watershed district and WMO plans. And it was Bowser that actually made us was it more than double our budget, Jamie, guys, to go through a much more extensive planning and public input process. So it really did pretty much start from scratch to create a whole new plan. So that the process was different than what we had originally envisioned, but very comprehensive and had a lot of input from a lot of folks. So.
Yep. So I will not spend the full length of time on this presentation, but just briefly go through where we are. And just a fun note, this photo is from the St. Croix River. It is somewhere north of Stillwater and south of Marina and St. Croix. And this island here is just covered in freshwater mussels. We found so many freshwater mussels, which of course is one of the species of concern in the St. Croix River watershed. So the participants in the Lower St. Croix 1 Watershed 1 plan, there are 15 local governmental entities, and they cover these two regions that are shaded orange and yellowish green on the map. There are the counties of Chisago, Isani, Pine, and Washington, the SWCDs from those counties, as well as Anoka, and then there are 6 watershed management organizations that are also part of this planning process. There's one other watershed management organization in Washington County Valley Branch that elected not to participate in the planning process, but they may end up adopting the plan and implementing components of it. I think that most of you already know the goal of 1 Watershed 1 Plan to align local water planning with state strategies. Our policy committee set a vision in the beginning of the planning process to have groundwater, lake streams, rivers, wetlands, and upland habitat sustain healthy ecosystems, recreation, public health, tourism, agriculture, economy, and quality of life. And the goal was really to address some of the gaps and help to share resources between the various watersheds, avoid duplication of efforts, and make wise use of funds. So there are this whole nest of different committees, and these structures will change a little bit as we're moving into the implementation instead of the planning. There will still be a policy committee, but it will be a new policy committee. So one of the things that all of the participating entities will have to do in December is designate who their person is going to be for the newly formed Joint Powers Agreement Policy Committee. And then there is this staff-led group, the steering committee, that will be kind of driving the process as well. So over the past 2.5 years, there was outreach, there was collection of data, there was priority and goal setting, an implementation plan was developed, a plan was written. We have been going through a formal review process, and we are at the point right now where it is sitting with Bowser, and we are waiting for formal approval from Bowser before the grant expires at the end of this year. And all of the partners will then move forward to adopting the plan and beginning implementation in 2021. So we've got a lot of great resources. Like I said, I'll go through this quickly. Lots of lakes, lots of rivers and streams, lots of groundwater. It is 100% of the drinking water in our watershed. So the groundwater is important not just for natural resources, but for all of us. We do have, as part of this plan, an interactive map that anyone can use where you can turn on and off different layers to find areas of, groundwater sensitivity or impaired lakes, non-impaired lakes, high quality wetlands, low quality wetlands. We had a lot of stakeholder engagement in the planning process. workshops and public meetings, online survey, farmer interviews, and mailed surveys. So we feel like we got some good participation from the public and good stakeholders. And some of the key themes were protecting the St. Croix River as our highest priority shared resource, but recognizing that the lakes are also very important to the public. Concerns about runoff pollution, especially from agricultural areas, groundwater pollution, aquatic invasive species, and not having resources shared equally across the watershed. And the desires were really to protect the high quality natural resources and restore impaired ones, have locally led watershed management and collaboration, and more public education and outreach. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the share. The next steps that we, let's see if I can find the right one here. Okay, the next steps from where we are right now, we are in the place right now where Bowser is reviewing the 10-year comprehensive plan that's been developed by this group and approved by the policy committee. And Dan and Barb will talk about that in a moment. And we, as a steering committee right now, are beginning the process of developing the annual plan and watershed-based implementation funds work plan for next year. So we know that there will be, I think it was about $1.2 million worth of watershed-based implementation funds delivered to the lower St. Croix area to implement the projects we identified as high priorities. But we still have a gap between what we hope to do and what there's going to be funding for. So that's kind of our challenge to figure out today. We did just send out an email to let the policy committee know that we would like to have a meeting on October 26th. We had originally told them they had off until November, but had to move that timeline up a little bit. And we'll be talking about providing guidance on some of these logistical things, how to terminate the existing planning MOU, how to adopt the Lower St. Croix Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan, how to approve and enter into the Joint Powers Agreement. Currently, the JPC suggests that partners must sign on within 120 days, and we would like to shrink that to 60 days just to make sure that everybody is working from the same plan beginning in 2021. And basically all of this is kind of moving us forward so that when we start next year, 2021, we will all be working on this new collaborative agreement and beginning work on the implementation plan with the goal of Bowser having approved our plan and the annual work plan and having funding starting in March, or I guess it would be April of 2021. So I'm gonna stop there and see if anybody wants to add anything, or if I should turn it over to Barb and Dan to provide updates from Bowser now. Okay. Barb.
We're gonna have Dan just talk about the plan time frame.
Okay.
Okay. So as Angie mentioned, the Lower St. Croix plan is in the 90-day final review and approval phase. And so that was, the plan was submitted to the state review agencies and Met Council for comments and that. The comments have been received. There pretty much wasn't any comments, good job, kudos given. There are two minor comments, one adding Metropolitan Council to the organizations that need to be notified and solicited comments from as part of the plan amendment process. And then I think maybe you guys are discussing this today, but it's one of the items in your implementation table for completion of SWAS. It's kind of an error in the amount of external funds needed. So your biannual budget amounts were correct. But one of the, and we had talked about this in a previous meeting, and Craig also brought it to my attention. I think it's Comfort Lake Forest Lake. Anyways, one of the local funding contributions was really kind of one-time dollars in that. They're not going to be ongoing. So, so you need to just correct that one item on how much external funds you need. So it's, yeah, not a really huge deal. So the next step in the review process right now is I'm working on the committee packet and staff recommendations that'll go to the Bowser Central Region Committee meeting on October 13th. And that's the meeting where the Lower St. Croix will have, some representatives, and I guess I don't remember, Craig, who you told me, if it was going to be you and Jamie and Laura, maybe doing a short, we like to have people do a short presentation to the Central Region Committee. So you'll kind of what Angie just went through, you'll tell about the planning process and kind of what your priorities are. I think it'd be good to mention you're already working on your work plan and that for implementation. And then assuming that the Central Region Committee it approves it, they'll be forwarding the plan to the full Bowser board, and that meeting will occur on October 28th. I think it is. It's usually in the morning. So I'm sure this one will be in the morning also. After that, you guys will adopt the plan and get your implementation agreement signed, and then you'll be on to the next step. And I think Barb's going to talk about that. I'm glad to answer any questions also.
Okay, if there's not any questions for Dan on the board approval, which we hope will go through with sailing colors, I think I'll get started. So I just wanted to, I'm going to share my screen, put the chat away. And I think Angie, I need you're muted.
Sorry
Angie.
about that. I forgot to give you permission. I will give you permission this moment.
Okay.
Okay, you should be good to go now.
Okay. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right, I won't be able, I don't have the chat open. So if there are questions, someone else bring them to my attention. But I've got about 10 minutes worth of stuff, and then maybe I can just save some questions for the end. But I wanted to start with not there. I have a bunch of windows open. So I wanted to start with your plan and see what it says in your plan. So on page 93 of your plan that you spent so much time developing, it talks about each year with input from the steering committee, which is this group, with input from the advisory committee, will develop an annual work plan to be recommended to the policy committee for their consideration. So that's kind of the process you're in right now. An annual work plan that has these items in it that you decided is on your entire comprehensive watershed management plan. So everything you're going to do in the next year, whether it relates to water resources or habitat or whatever. But what we're focusing on today is a subset of that. So it says the work plan will be used to develop a biennial budget request for watershed-based implementation funds, WBIF, to Bowser. So this is what we're talking about today, is that the state has some clean water fund money from the amendment, sales tax revenue, to give these groups So it's our state tax dollars that we're using to implement these plans statewide when they're done. So that's what we're talking about. WBIF, watershed-based implementation funds, that's a subset of everything that you might want to do because, for example, if you want to move forward with some habitat things, they may not be eligible for Clean Water Fund dollars or these WBIF dollars. So this is what we're talking about today. So I just kind of wanted to ground you first. I'm going to go over to, we have on our Bowser website a watershed-based implementation funding program webpage. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with it. Some of you have probably never seen it before, but there's a couple items on here that might be helpful if you need to go back and find things. So for example, your approved allocations, which I think were in the packet today, these were for fiscal years 2021, what was approved. So you're a 2017 planning grant. So this says non-metro. So you have this $471,000 plus you decided to pool, the folks in the metro decided to pool their funding together. So then it adds to the $793,000. So you have a total of $1,264,531 are the allocations that's going to this group from fiscal year 2021 money. So it's biennial money, not annual money. So the 1.2 million is every other year. And there was a question, we did have a smaller amount of sales tax receipts because of COVID. And so there were reductions to Clean Water Fund, including WBIF this year, but those were for planning grants that were in the next stage from you. So they're just gonna have to wait. Their funding wasn't necessarily reduced. They're just gonna have to wait for FY 22-23 funds to come around. So you guys remained whole. You have that 1.2 million to have a conversation about today from that Clean Water Fund dollars. We recommend that you have the budget request in, you know, we recommended in January. You might not have it ready till February. This is a big group and you're just at the first stage of this. But the hard deadline that we have is the March 30th of 2021. That's when you need your Bowser staff approved. So Dan will approve your E-Link work plan. That has to be done by March 30th of next year, or that money will be reallocated to any of these other groups in the state that also have lots of things to do. So that's kind of a hard deadline. And if anybody's interested in the details, I'm happy to share some Bowser board orders with them if they want to see any of that detail. Your money is, the grant money expires December 31st of 2023. That's a question we get asked quite a bit. And then you'll be back together in 2 years from now, hopefully with FY 22-23 funding. And we have, you know, really no idea because the legislature appropriates the funding. If there would be a reduction still from the economy and sales tax for FY 22-23, although it doesn't have to be to all our programs down the board equally. And I know there's a lot of support for this implementation money, both from your some of your associations and from Bowser board and members and from the Clean Water Council. So it's hard to predict what FY 22-23 will mean in the future, but I just wanted to bring that up because we're asked about that. And today, again, we're just focused on the FY 2021 funding and you guys remained whole. So you have that 1.2 million. Now I'm going to go back to our Bowser webpage. And we have a policy for every biennium. We have a policy for each of our funding programs. And this is the watershed-based implementation funding policy. So I just want to pull out a couple things. I mean, this type of funding is way different than our competitive grant funding. I mean, basically, if it's eligible because of our policy, you're an eligible entity and it's an eligible activity, it's in the implementation section of your plan, then it moves forward. So So I'm just going to show you where some of those items are in here. So again, if you're an eligible entity, that's where this explains who can actually be a grantee. The activities, again, the difference in watershed-based funding this biennium is that it has to be the implementation section of these state approved and locally adopted comprehensive plans. So everything you're talking about later today is actually from your implementation table, so that doesn't seem to be an issue at all. It is important, you're going to talk about some SWAs today and some other things, some surface subwatershed analysis reports, but you know, it's not just on the ground things. This is, you know, site investigations, assessment, feasibility, that kind of stuff is allowed under our policy. Project support, here's where your education and outreach type of activities are. Obviously your administration to get, you know, keep the grant going, those are all eligible, and you can read the details. If you have something that you're not sure about, talk to Dan and I about it, but basically pages 6 and 7 of our policy say, here are the things you really can't do with this money. And we try to keep it pretty straightforward. The most important one, I think, is what you're doing going to have a primary benefit to groundwater or surface water quality? So if what you're doing is for flooding, then no, that's not eligible. But if it's a primary groundwater and surface water quality, that's probably the biggest one that to keep in your mind when you're talking about specific projects. All right. I think that's all I was going to cover in the policy. So now I'm going to bump over to not that. Okay, so we have a 3-page document that says this is how you actually request the funds from Bowser when you have decided what you want to do with the 1.2 million, is you actually put in a formal budget request. And these we're batching them monthly. So if you get these budget requests in, they'll get processed at the end of the month, or you have to wait till the next month. So anyway, if any of you have used competitive clean water, gone after clean water competitive grants, I know not all of you have from Bowser, but for those that have, this is very, very similar because we only have our one eLink database. So we're basically using the same, kind of the same field. So you'll submit a project abstract, and I know I already shared this, I think, already with Craig, but it says, okay, here's an example for these types of one watershed, one plan processes, what your abstract might look like. Who's going to be involved, how to lump and split things. I'm not going to go into that. One difference is that we require annual milestones. Those of you in the Metro who were part of the pilot WBIF money already know this, but since it's such a big amount of money, we want to say, well, what are you actually going to do in the first year so we know you're on track? So will be a separate attachment to eLink. You'll have your work plan, eLink work plan, but then you'll have attachments too, and this will be one of your attachments, is to lay out the annual milestones.
Hey, Barb.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of like Karen Kill's question. She says, what level of detail is required for the watershed-based implementation fund plan? For example, can we go with the one watershed, one plan language of saying ag BMP cost share, or do we need more specifics on what projects are going to get funded with the cost share?
Yes. So Dan, can you please answer these questions? Because he's the one who's actually going to be reviewing your work plan.
I was kind of hoping you were going to tell me.
Well, I
the
can
answer,
start.
Barb.
I can start.
So let me throw this out. So I would want to know what specific resource that you're what you're going to do for that resource. You know, what you're.
But for example, might it be like we're going to put in 10 projects targeted to this sub-watershed without having to identify the specific projects that would be implemented?
Oh, yeah. I don't think you have to, because you're not going to know exactly what those are, right?
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't cited them on the landowner's property. So as far as that, I think the description of that's from your implementation plan, but then you're going to also need to know, what are your pollutant removals targeted are going to be. Barb?
Yeah, so I would say there's quite a bit of discussion on this. Like, you want to be specific enough so that Dan and I know that you're following your plan, but you might want your E-Link work plan to be a little more vague and then have like an attachment that has more details in it, because then that can offer you a bit of flexibility as far as amendments. But if you look at this example, it's like, if you're going to say we're going to do egg BMPs, that's nice, but Dan and I need to know, like, well, what types of egg BMPs are you going to do? Just so we can make sure they're eligible, right? So we'll need some extra detail, but how much is actually in your budget request and E-Link work plan? That'll just be up to you guys and Dan. And I think some LGUs have found trying to have their E-Link work plan be not as specific to give them some flexibility, but have an attachment in E-Link that has more specifics, so everybody kind of knows what they're doing. Again, we're kind of limited to what we already have existing in our E-Link database. So I don't know if I'm helping or making it worse, Dan, or Karen, if that answers your question.
I think, Craig's did the targeted grant program and that. So I think that's another good example.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what this is based on.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it is, and we're working on right now, just like a work plan example, like a Stormy County work plan example at Bowser, because I know some people have asked for it, but just so we're a little more consistent statewide, but it's not a requirement. So I think we need to be thoughtful about how you guys, the level of detail you put in your budget request and work plan and E-Link. But I don't know that necessarily is a conversation we have to have today.
Thank you, Barb and Dan. I just wanted to have a quick follow-up question to that. Are we able to use our work plans that we've used for previous watershed-based funding as a model for moving forward? Because we have a lot of those in place currently for Metro funding.
Dan?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends. I suppose it's a model. You mean like for the spreadsheet that you fill out before you actually do the request in E-Link?
Are you talking about like a cost share program?
That and directly responding to Karen's question, because a number of the activities that we're doing currently in the metropolitan area are more programmatic and not CIP focused. And so if we're able to continue to do, follow that as a precedence, then I think that answers Karen's question.
Yeah,
yes.
It probably depends on which of those you're talking about. Yeah, I think as long as you pretty much answer the questions that are here, so we know, what your resources that you're focusing on, and what BMPs that you're proposing, not necessarily specific ones in a specific area, because if you're doing it as a program kind of deal, a cost share program, you don't have those landowners lined up yet.
Right.
So,
thank you.
But then it's also going to be, you're going to use your SWAs in that to cite those, right?
Yes.
So.
And I think what we've allowed for, like, say, education and outreach, we would need more outputs. So we know you won't know like how many meetings you're going to have, but like some idea of you're going to have meetings, you're going to produce stuff, maybe they're ranges of stuff, more like outputs, but not so detailed that it's going to hamstring you as your education evolves, right, over the couple of years. So we can work with you on that. Okay, so then the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that we have these things called assurance measures. And I don't know the last time Dan and I even said these words out loud to this group, so probably it's on us, but I don't want you to be surprised that we have these assurance measures. Basically, we've been asked to have something, since this is non-competitive funding, to see if we're making progress, right? Or really to see if you guys are making progress. And so things we can do is that we can collect all the E-Link data that comes in as far as watershed-based implementation funding, and we can collect that and keep track of that. So near at the end of the project, but then we also have some additional questions that, and we haven't even used these yet for our pilot. We want to kind of have a conversation with you guys near at the end of your project and say, well, how did it go? Like, you know, how's it going with watershed-based implementation funds? And that could be part of a steering committee meeting or a planning team committee. We can use existing meetings. We don't want this to be overly burdensome. And then these are not approved yet, but I just wanted to give you an example of what these are. There's basically like 4 main assurance measure categories that our board has approved, and then we're working on the specific questions. We got a lot of input from local government roundtable staff over the last couple of years on these, but we haven't. We're hopefully going to post these in the next month on our webpage. But basically, the first one is, are you doing prioritized, targeted, and measurable work? So are you making progress? You guys have a really good implementation table that has measurable goals, and like, is the stuff you're doing making progress towards those? And the second one is, are you doing stuff in your priority areas? Again, your implementation table has your priority areas listed. So we just want to know, are you mostly doing that stuff in the priority areas? And if not, then why not? And then the third one is like, are you pretty much on schedule and on budget? And then the last one is, have you leveraged anything? That's just something very interesting to both our board and the Clean Water Council and legislators. Is this, are you able to leverage other funds? So again, these are meant to be just a conversation that we have near the end of the grant, but some people find these, when these are ready for external distribution, I'm going to share them with the group, because I think people find them helpful when they're doing this work planning. But I kind of feel like you guys are right on target. You're already picking out the priority A stuff out of your table. You have the priority areas listed. You have measurable goals. So I think you're going to be just fine. But you know, some people are like, oh, what should we work on? And you guys are very focused, and you actually picked up your plan and are using it. So we don't really have any concerns about that. So
so there's a couple of questions here in the chat.
I can stop sharing my screen and then I can look at them. Unless they're ones you're going to answer.
I don't know, now I just lost them. Oh, they're there. We already talked about Karen. So Mike asked, so milestones are number of projects and not numeric projects towards goals. Milestones are what it's, what's your progress towards what you said you were going to be doing in your work plan, and that, you know, are at the 1 year or whatever, 6 months, you know, have you accomplished that stuff that you need to have done so you can complete the whole work plan? I guess that was and Karen then asked, how does this apply to shared positions, specifically what requirements for outcomes? Never mind. I guess Barb already answered that, 10% match.
And I guess one other thing I'd mention is that our preference, and I'm going to say preference, not requirement, our preference is that this money is lumped together under one grantee and fiscal agent. That is what we've been trying to do statewide. If you guys have an instance where it really doesn't make sense for one of your projects to move forward in that manner, you can make that case to Dan and me, and we can have a conversation about it. So I think we've allowed a lot more flexibility in the metro to have individual grant agreements, and we have not allowed that as much flexibility for that statewide. And since you're pooling your money, you know, we just want to kind of be fair to some of those other groups. But again, if you have a case where like one of the projects, it doesn't even make sense to route it through whoever ends up being your grantee fiscal agent, we can have a conversation on that. Karen, did we answer all your questions?
I guess I'm just kind of curious about the level of detail still in that we have this implementation plan that had to be, you know, measurable, show outcomes. Are we able to just sort of pull this first biennial of what's in our existing work plan of what we agree on to submit, and basically that's enough information, or are you expecting significantly more? Because I think that really will inform this group how much more, you know, we need to meet and hash out specifically where those projects are going to go before, you know, if you're looking for this in January, how that's going to play out. I'm just kind of thinking of what the logistics of what our actual work plan ends up looking like. I know this is the first step to even figure out, you know, what adds up to 1.2 million when we already have 1.8 million. Not many of those projects, I think, are ineligible. I think they're almost all or nearly so eligible, but I suppose that's the next part of our conversation. But for me, one of the top priorities is these shared positions, and to what, you know, what I'm looking at the examples you're showing, Barb, there's a heck of a lot more detail about, you know, much more CIP-like on outcomes, and that isn't necessarily going to be the case with, you know, a shared educator or agronomist.
Yeah, I think for those we won't. That's like, you don't have pollution reductions for those, right? So I think it's fine. It's more like output. What is that position doing? And Dan, you can correct me. What is that position doing? Are they, you know, some of the Metro WBIF outreach education type stuff, or for some of the position stuff, we're like, okay, you're going to meet with about 30 irrigation, you know, landowners or something like that, or you're going to hold meetings, you're going to, you know, do agendas and plan policy and advisory committee meetings for the next 3 years. You're going to go out and meet with, you know, up to 50 landowners. Those kind of things would be what your outputs would be and your milestones would be for kind of those, just, you know, because you won't have pollution reductions.
Yeah,
Hey,
I
Barb.
agree. Go ahead.
Barb, Dan, Mike Kinney here. So I was just curious on that example that you pulled up and provided. You had something like 100, you were going to contact this 135 landowners about stream bank stuff. So I'll just tell you, I don't know who crafted that for Bowser, but I really dislike it. I think it's from a metric standpoint, if we're ever really going to be serious about achieving goals across the state, we have to get really focused on our, I mean, it's one thing to be prioritized and say, yeah, we want to do sediment and the stream channels, but the targeted stuff is that, I mean, just from example, and I've been talking about this to death with regard to using real science and data rather than, I don't know what with some of these other ones. Reaching out to 135 landowners about potential projects for stream banks. I mean, unless there are thousands of landowners that have issues, I mean, I can give you a very solid example that I have from experience, where we had hundreds of stream banks that we walked every mile of the Hay River and all their tributaries. And we came up with 5 sites that reduced 25% of the sediment load based off of actual pinning of the stream bank and measuring. So that's the focus I feel that we need if we're ever going to get really close to, you achieving the goals. So when I look at milestones, I hope they're more focused than what is being proposed. So,
If I can respond to that. So you guys have, I think it's Appendix C of your plan that talks about how you're going to specifically select projects and give them points and put them on a list. So say you decide today that you're going to have $200,000 or $500,000 go to ag BMPs. You know, what we need in the E-Link budget request is that you're going to do ag BMPs to reduce phosphorus or sediment by X pounds, and what water bodies and what areas you're going to focus on. And then you guys are going to select, you know, use Appendix C and select exactly which projects you're going to do using that criteria that you developed during the planning process. So I think you do have that level of detail, Mike, but it'll be part of this process. But I think Karen's question was, when do we have to have that level of detail where we know exactly where the project's going to go? And for me, you don't need that level of detail when you put your budget request in.
So I guess it would make sense to me then, as far as you're targeting your outreach and that, you would base it on those SWAs then, because those are the areas where you're looking to cite projects. But that's up to this group how to define what you need to do for outreach or for those positions. But I mean, it should be based on your plan. I had, not to hijack it too much, but before I got lost connection the last time, Jay had posted a note that you're planning on having Jay, Fran, and Matt Moore be the ones that attend the Bowser Central Region Committee. And I guess, you know, those are all Metro people. I would encourage you to maybe have a non-Metro person attend. It's going to be a WebEx meeting, so it isn't like you have to drive into the cities and park or anything. But I think that would play better. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but to me, that would look better.
Yeah, Dan, that was my suggestion to the group, but I wasn't at the meeting and was assigned the role.
And you won?
Yeah, exactly. So
he wasn't there, so we decided he was the one.
Yep.
Yeah,
but Craig and I have been talking about that a little bit too. Craig, do you want to respond to that?
I agree. We've been going round and round exactly who's going to be there presenting, and Jay wasn't at the meeting, and so he didn't object to being the one doing the presenting. So we went with Jay. So we can continue talking about that, Dan, as a group. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine if like Jay is presenting, but you know, you or somebody else from the non-Metro could be sitting in on the meeting and can get introduced to the group as being there. I don't know. I just think it'd play better, and then you could, the non-Metro people, if there's any questions related to that, could talk on that. But yeah, in the end, it's whatever you guys decide will be fine.
Dan, why do you need a list of who's going to attend from our organization?
Let's see. I think it would be good to have it by October 6th at the latest. And I'm not sure that, you know, it can change from there. I was just thinking we have to send out an invite for the WebEx and that. And if it changes later than that, I'll figure it out. I mean.
Yeah, we'll talk about it internally and get things figured out.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, that's all I had, Angie.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, other questions from the group before Craig and Jamie talk about the updates needed to the GPA briefly? All right, Jamie, Craig, do you want to, I don't think it requires too much explanation since we already sent out an email, but maybe just verbally explain to everybody why we're making this request?
Yeah, can do. Craig, you want me to roll with this and you can chime in?
Sounds good.
Okay, I recognize we're getting a little behind on our agenda too, so we'll try to be brief. I think the most important thing for everyone to know about the Joint Powers Agreement is don't have your boards consider signing it or joining it right now. We're going to be having a policy committee meeting where there'll be a few tweaks. And November is the month that you should be doing that. So inform them if you like, but don't take action yet or you'll have to redo it later. The edits that we see coming for the Joint Powers Collaboration Agreement and the policy committee to consider this is to change the joining period for the initial parties. Angie mentioned this. Right now, the agreement says that there's a 120-day period in which the initial parties can join, and the policy committee can't meet until that 120 days is done. If we do that, we can't meet until February, and we will essentially miss the watershed-based funding deadline at Bowser. So we can't do that. So we shorten it from 120 to 60 days. We'll probably touch up the administrative coordinator, or the initial coordinator. There'll be a period between when the agreement starts and when we have our first annual work plan that we need to set some staff leadership. And Washington Conservation District has offered to be kind of a programmatic administrator, and Chisago SWCD is an administrative or fiscal administrator just until the first work plan is approved. Others certainly are invited to speak up. If you'd like to have a role too, we'll be working on that. Third edit is to simplify the process for adding additional partners. Since it's only going to be 60 days, we're going to make it easier. Right now, there's quite an approvals process, and we'll simplify that. And lastly, we want to make more clear the elected or appointed officials that have to be on the policy committee. Chisago County, for instance, has 3 positions, and if they were all county commissioners, that would be a problem for public meeting law. You'll all be getting a memo in the coming weeks about guiding what your boards should consider for actions. It's up to your legal counsel and your staff to take that and bring it home. One last note on all of this is that there's been lots of questions about what does it mean if my board adopts the watershed plan, and through conversations with Bowser, it's been clear that that means that it can be a replacement of your current plan, a replacement of your plan for a part of your county, or it can just be a supplement or a guidance document, and your board's resolution is going to make that clear. Craig, I think the only other thing we have is that we're looking to get a tally of anyone who is not planning to adopt the watershed plan. Did I miss anything else?
No, I think that's good, Jamie. I'm working with our county attorney, Mr. Fugi. He did just send me the draft memo again. Jamie, I think he copied you. So we're finalizing that. Jamie and I are meeting with County Attorney Fugi later this afternoon to get this stuff finalized. We should hopefully have a draft resolutions for hopefully all. That's my goal anyway, to get some of that stuff out to you. I think that's it. I think we'd like to know, is the 60-day window not doable for anybody? So like we said, we're going to have the October policy committee meeting, and we're hoping that everybody will basically adopt the joint powers collaboration agreement at that point within that next 60 days and adopt the watershed-based implementation plan, or the comprehensive watershed management plan. Is there anybody who doesn't think their organization is going to adopt it or sign the JPC?
Can I throw something in there, Craig, that I...
Yes, please.
So the non-metro entities, if they adopt, they're adopting and they're substituting the Lower St. Croix plan for that area of their plan that's within the Lower St. Croix planning boundary.
Correct.
Okay, it's voluntary, but so there's ramifications if they don't adopt and substitute, then they would have to continue on with the county water planning process. So if they adopt a one watershed, one plan, for the RUM or whatever, they don't adopt it for the Lower St. Croix, they would still have to do their county water planning process.
And they wouldn't be an eligible entity for watershed-based implementation funding.
Correct.
Which I don't know if all the staff and all your board members actually understand that, but I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yep, Barb, this is Derek from Isani County. That was one of the questions that came up with my policy committee members and my administrator is that if we choose to opt in and supplement this watershed plan for the 14% of Isani County, that what would, I guess, the concern is that our natural resource block grant funding will go away by 2025. Is that the intent from Bowser to replace this watershed based funding for our natural resource block grant funding?
I haven't heard that, Barb.
No, I haven't heard that either.
Okay, so the watershed based implementation funding is above and beyond than the natural resource
Yeah, it
block grant
has
funding.
nothing to do with that.
Okay, that clarifies it in my mind, and also for my administrator, we had that question on a revolving door with the policy committee members as well. So it will not replace that. Then this is extra funding for specific watershed goals.
Yeah, I can. I don't know, Jamie. Do you want me to? Because I've gotten now some draft language of what's going to be in the board order. Do you want me to, maybe I should like send you that? Would that?
If it's something you can share with the group, I think that might help ease concerns about what does it mean when we adopt this plan.
Yep.
How much do you want me to read? Sorry, I don't know who I talked over, but I apologize.
This is Derek. I would appreciate that, Dan. That would help me understand it along with everyone else here at Isani County. So if that's available to be shared.
But I think you need to be clear. If you're a non-metro entity, your option is to adopt and replace your county water plan for that portion of your county. You don't get to choose that it's like adopt and something else. If you're in the metro, you get to have that other option.
Yeah, I'll read the two items here that are going to be in the resolution. So it's going to say the attached plan, when adopted through local resolution by the members of the partnership, will serve as a substitute for the comprehensive plan, local water management plan, or watershed management plan developed or amended, approved, and adopted according to chapters 103B, 103C, or 103D, but only to the geographic area of the plan and consistent with the one watershed, one plan suggested boundary map. 6, the attached plan, when adopted through local resolution by the members of the partnership within the metropolitan area as defined in Minnesota Statute Section 103B 205 sub 8, or metropolitan counties defined by Minnesota Statute 473 121 sub 4, is not required to serve as a substitute for the comprehensive plan, the local water management plan, or the watershed management plan developed or amended, approved, adopted according to 103B, 103C, and 103D. So the metro organizations, they're like the WMO plans and the watershed district plans, those already meet the requirements for a comprehensive water management plan. So that's the reasoning for that. So they have a choice. They could sign on to the implementation agreement, and then as far as Bowser is concerned, they could adopt or not adopt, but to me, it's their existing plan should already be consistent, and that's what they have to operate under, is their existing plan. So their existing plan should be consistent with what's being proposed in the Lower St. Croix plan. So I don't know if that cleared it up or if it made it more muddy. But there's differences between, I guess what we're trying to point out is there's differences between the metro people adopting and the non-metro.
And if you have questions, Dan and I are here to help answer them offline too.
To try.
And if somebody would please, just Craig, if you don't think your organization is going to sign on, please let us know as soon as possible. This is critical for us to make sure that we have all the partners needed to implement the plan to meet the requirements for Bowser for the watershed-based implementation fund. So if you don't know now, or if you don't want to speak up now, please let us know, myself or Jamie know as soon as you can. Angie, that's everything I have. Jamie, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nothing more.
Okay. And so I'm going to move right into the heart of the meeting, and this will kind of double as an opportunity to provide initial input on funding priorities and potentially a bathroom or coffee break for anybody who needs it. I am sharing into the chat box. Everybody let me know if there's anybody who is not able to see what's in the chat box. I have a poll function. It's a kind of like an online version of an activity that we might do if we were at an in-person meeting. And what I did was I took all of the activities that are outlined in the spreadsheet, which everybody should be able to see my computer now. I had already sent this. Craig Mell already went through our spreadsheet of implementation actions and pulled out all of them that were identified as A priority actions, added in the subwatershed analyses and the administration overhead costs. And that was how we got to this total of having about $1.8 million worth of potential expenses. And as Barb let us know, we were actually beginning more like $1.2 million. So we have a $600,000 shortfall between what we would love to do in an ideal world and what we will actually be able to do. So all of these things have been put into this little poll feature. And when you click on the link, what you will be able to do for each of those actions, you can slide a little slider to say at what percentage you think this activity should be funded using our watershed-based implementation funding. So if it's something that you think we should not be funding at all with watershed-based implementation funds, slide that dragger down to the 0. If you think it's something that should be fully, completely funded with the WBIF funds, slide it up to the 100. If you think it's something that we should partially fund, you can kind of put that slider somewhere in the middle. And this is not like a hard, fast way that we're voting, but this is just a way to maybe help kick off our conversation, that once everybody has kind of taken an initial vote, we should be able to see, relatively speaking, how important different activities are to people. It will give us a mean value. So some activities might get 100 if everybody's saying they should be fully funded. Some activities might get a 25 if a lot of people are suggesting only partial funding. Does that make sense? And if yes, and if everybody can access that little poll feature, we could maybe take like a 5 to 10 minute working break while you are filling out the poll. And during that time, you can also refill your coffee and go to the bathroom, and then we'll gather back just slightly after 11 to see what the initial poll results are saying. Does anybody have any concerns? Is everybody able to access the poll? Okay, I hear a lot of silence. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up.
Angie, can I ask a question?
Yes.
This is Caleb.
Yep.
There's one of the items that I am a little bit unclear on. It's the identify wetland restoration opportunities and work with landowners. I guess a lot of that, would there be a technical analysis included in that dollar figure? Or is that more like outreach, people billing time for, meeting with landowners and entities? What do those costs look like? And maybe I don't know who would answer that.
Yeah, that is a great question. Who would answer that? I've got that pulled up on the screen so everybody can see it. It's identified as $150,000 cost, with approximately half of that coming from local funds and hoping to get the other half paid for through the watershed-based implementation funds. And unfortunately, I am not going to be the one that's going to be able to answer the question as to what that actually would look like. Anybody else on this call able to do that?
No, but this is Barb. We'd have to, in order for it to be eligible to WBIF funds, it would have to have a water quality, not just water quantity, focus to those projects or to that work.
Okay. And I know that there is more detail, that this table is connected to more detailed, you know, like sub-tables that are in the plan. And so pulling it out for the purposes of this exercise, we kind of lose some of that detail, unfortunately. Karen asked, what does it mean that the shared ag position might already be funded? Is this a goal? Craig can probably speak more to this, but a portion of the position, or there is some outreach that's already happening through Mary Jo Youngbauer through the end of 2021, but I think that this group is looking for additional funding to hire a second staff person. Is that correct, Craig?
No, we have Mary Jo Youngbauer, who's working as a watershed conservation planner through a state/federal grant with Bowser. So it's partially funded by NRCS and partially funded by Bowser. The funding comes to us from Bowser as a reimbursement. It is funded currently through 2021. So it's been about a 3.5-year program, started back, I guess, late 2018, all of 2019, 2020, 2021. The group that meets to discuss currently Mary Jo's position and workload is the NRCS and SWC staff in each of those counties, so Pine, Isania, Anoka, Washington, Chisago. We meet a few different times of the year, work on priority work areas by their county and in the watershed. So like I said, currently she's working full-time through the end of 2021. And so this would be if the group decides to continue and wants that position to continue. We would not need funds for all of 2021 for her position. Mary Jo is a certified plan writer and has all the access to NRCS programs as an NRCS employee would, which is an SWC employee.
But in terms of the funding, the $250,000 that we want right now, that is to hire an additional person.
Angie, I can hardly hear you. I don't know if something changed. I can't.
Now you're totally muted, Angie. There we go. Suddenly something happened there. Nope. Someone else is making noise. Mike, can we hear you?
Yeah, I think I'm still good.
Yep.
I'm going to take this moment too. I wanted to just chime in real quick there on one of the items. I just want to make sure that folks understand that at the very right, the conduct 5 sub watershed analysis, that was identified as a priority in year 1 and 2 by the group, because when we looked at the areas that had, prioritized, measurable, and targeted projects already done through sub-watershed analysis, we were basically missing a lot of areas, including all of the areas directly discharging to the St. Croix, with the exception of Chisago County escarpment prioritization work that had been done. And so I kind of saw that as a really high priority for us making good decisions moving forward. Not to advocate, but I just want to make sure everybody understood what that category was about. It's really about getting that prioritization and targeting done for areas where we want to implement BMPs.
Mike, can you clarify too? SWA doesn't mean one specific protocol. Could targeted monitoring be funded, or some other prioritization techniques? It's whatever the group decides to do to be able to prioritize, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the plan, the prioritization process has been called sub-watershed analysis, but the definition of that is much more broad. And so that prioritization process is the important part for that
Right.
funding category.
Yeah, so that really should just be called prioritization. That includes a field component, not just modeling.
Right, and a summary report of the highest of the prioritized practices that were identified in that process.
Cool, thank you.
And I guess I would like to follow up on that. That is a priority for us to have a SWA done for Rock Lake or Rock Creek. And I have not been able to spend the time to dig in to see how many different resources are going to be looking for those funds for the SWA. I'm assuming, was some time spent on whether that number is appropriate? I'm sure it was.
I'm just going to say yes to that one, but I think the focus is going to be on those areas that haven't had a lot of prioritization work done, not necessarily in areas that have SWAs that are completed, currently underway, et cetera. It would be to support those areas in the northern reaches of the watershed. Actually, technically, is northern the north, or is, I got to say upper? So lower reaches of the watershed, which is the northern portion of the watershed, right?
I like north and south.
Yeah, I know. I always find it fascinating how much of that watershed drains to the north, and we're not used to that direction of flow in North America, at least in the United States.
Angie, we can't hear you yet. And I was wondering if zeros and dashes are different from each other. And I had to refresh my screen so I could see how everybody weighed in, if people are seeing
Angie,
the whole thing.
Angie, could you tell us if someone doesn't vote, it's a dash, and if they want it to be zero, they actually have to put it to zero, correct? Thumbs up if that's the case.
I'm trying to figure out what to do to make you guys hear me again.
We can hear you distantly, so it's as though you're talking through a microphone that's not near you.
Very weird. This happened to me once before that like nothing changed and suddenly nobody could hear me anymore.
Now we can hear you again.
Okay.
Better.
All right.
It just ramped in. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm back. Okay, I will just share my screen so you can see, everybody else can see the same voting tally that I can see. Is that will probably help us to have a more meaningful conversation. So I might need to shrink this a little. I'm just looking to see, is there anybody who are missing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
I don't see Derek.
Yep, I was just gonna say, I don't see Derek in there. Obviously, Craig and Dan won't be responding. I am not going to add to this since Jay is already putting in for our organization. We might have a slight double count from Comfort Lake, Forest Lake, because we have both Mike Kinney and Emily responding.
Angie, this is Derek. I went to the restroom and I'm trying to get registered here to take the poll. So I'm trying to go through it right now.
Okay.
I think there might be one that was missing that was on the spreadsheet listed as a priority A. But isn't on here.
There was, because it was, there's two different things that were listed with a 0 expense, and so I didn't bother putting them on the pool because it's 0. So, or did I miss one that had a money dollar?
Yeah, it was the provide outreach and education to lake associations or lake groups, ... and it had $80,000 in there.
It said that that 80,000 was coming from local and stable external funds and $0 in WIF
Yep,
needed.
gotcha. Cool.
Yep, so
All right.
I left that one out, and I also left out the outreach, education, and ordinance development for MIDS because that also had a 0. And the perform alum treatment cart management, that was also a 0. So I only put in the ones that we were expecting expenses in this first 2 years worth of time.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so while we all lean over Derek's shoulder.
Angie, I don't know. I just got a kicker here that said one error prohibited this user from being saved. So I don't know what's going on. I'll try to get it back on here and submit my results, but it'll be a few minutes.
Okay. All right, so in the meantime, I am just gonna kind of scroll through. It looks like we have the most consistency in the belief that the 5 sub-watershed analyses should be fully funded. We do have a few people recommending partial funding for that. In other words, I think that would mean perhaps doing 4 sub-watershed analyses instead of 5, or finding some kind of local funds to help fund that. It looks like we have a decent amount of agreement. Well, about admin, that's one that's less in our control than some of these other things. Let's see, what is this middle category here? Shared education. What I'm looking at is at the bottom here, the the total number. So which ones are closest to 100 versus furthest from 100. So we have a fair amount of disagreement about providing cost share for and actively promoting, installing, implementing, or retrofitting best management practices and green infrastructure on developed or developing lands. And that is one that it looks like on average, people are thinking should maybe be partially funded at a like 50 to 60% rate of what we're hoping to get. The trick to this is that, of course, whatever amounts we take out would have to add up to $600,000, right? So if we partially funded an inexpensive activity, it wouldn't actually reduce our amounts by very much. I'm just pulling out the old.
Angie?
Yes.
Can we back up? And I mean, $250,000 is a lot of money in that first one. And I said 0 because I think it should be 100%, but it's already funded. So I don't think it needs to come out of this money. And we're only talking about funding for 2021 with this funding. So I feel really strongly that that one just come out of this, and that's already $250,000 out of our $550,000 difference.
May I interject on that, Angie? This is Craig.
Yep, and it looks like Derek's votes are in now, so we've got everybody in the group is in here. Like I said, this isn't like we're deciding this. This is just maybe a good way to take the pulse for us to now have a conversation as a group about some of these questions.
Yeah,
Correct
so
me if I'm wrong,
I would
but
really love to hear Craig's thoughts on that. So that's because I feel it's really important, but I just want to, if it's already funded somewhere else. So if you could talk to that, Craig, that'd be great.
Yeah, and Barb just responded there. It's actually for 3 years. So this grant runs through December of 2023. I think the goal here would be that this, the first year of this program, or 2021, is funded through our other state/federal grant that we have. It would be carrying that forward then in 2022 and into 2023 for this one. That's why I struggled too giving it 100%, because I look at it and I go, I don't need the 100% funding to continue it. What we need is a 2022, 2023 year to fund this.
So when is the next round of this funding though? I know we have until 2023, for instance, to spend it if we're working on like a CIP type project. But if this is something that's actually funding a real person for specific years, in our budget, we have it for every biennium in the One Watershed One plan. So wouldn't we need another $250,000 for the next 2-year piece? I mean, I don't understand extending that out to the fullest extent of the grant. Or how much does this person cost per year, I guess is what I don't understand.
I think that's a good question, Karen. I think that's a good, my assumption would be that in 2 years, we're doing this again for the next biennium. And so my goal would be that we're looking for basically a half of a funding. So for 2021 is funded through the grant that I currently have with Bowser. And then for calendar year 2022, the position would be paid for under this watershed-based implementation funds. And then we're sitting here in 2 years looking at the new allocation of watershed-based implementation funds and looking at funding that position if it's successful for 2023, 2024 in that biennium grant dollars. Now, I will defer to Bowser to make sure I said that correctly.
I was trying to type, but it's easier to talk. For FY 22-23 funding, it's likely that would be available to this partnership in the second year of the biennium, because you're coming in now in the second year of the biennium, but we just don't know that yet. But I think that's the overall plan. We have to balance it. It comes to us from the legislature as a biennium amount, but then we have to figure out how much we're actually spending each year. And since you guys are going in the second year of the biennium right now, you'd probably go in the second year of the biennium next time. But that ship has not sailed yet.
And Karen, to answer your question, we have about a $400,000 budget or grant with Bowser for this one. And that includes a little bit of admin, overall majority of it's for the conservation planner. And then we have a bunch for engineering assistance. And so there's currently been for staff time engineering assistance, which has been either Rebecca down at the Washington Conservation District or an engineering staff person that we have available. And so we have a mixture of funds there also for engineering. So again, I feel confident that we could be looking at, essentially, if you're interested in this position, you fund it, you give it 100%, and then it's going to be slashed in half when we're working on the actual budget. It would be for 2022. I hope that clarifies it.
Karen?
That does clarify it. I'm changing my votes then.
Okay.
To 50% for that one, since that's all the funding we would really need. And then I would keep sliding down, and I'm recalculating my spreadsheet of what I had to equal each other. I would keep adjusting the amount for cost share for equally same percentages for cost shares for ag as well as cost share for development, and all those other smaller pieces I would leave at 100%. So I am changing my vote in that regard.
And I guess, Karen, maybe I misunderstood. I would encourage, if you're supportive of the program, to leave it at 100, and the budget number will be cut in half is what will end up happening. Because if you put it at 50% and you're fully supporting it, then it's going to lower that overall number. Where if you're supportive of it at 100% funding, and I think Jamie said it best too, and Jamie Sherban suggested we look at funding the position through 2023. That way we have stability on with that position. We're not sitting here 2 years doing the same thing. So I would advocate, don't look so much at the budget number. Realize that the budget number, 1 year of that budget number is going to be removed from that overall budget, whether it's a 2-year or 3-year program.
So Craig, would I be correct though that we could take like $75,000 out?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just adding up to try to make like the potential reductions add up to 600,000. And so For example, if we took that 75,000 out, and if, for example, on the urban BMPs, we funded, you know, $175,000 worth of urban BMPs instead of $350,000, you know, that gets us up to 250. We still have 350 to go to get to where we would need to be. So this is kind of the point in the meeting when I'm
Hey,
hoping,
Angie,
yes.
Angie, there's a couple chat questions that are going on right
Yes.
there. Mike has asked twice now about the SWA stuff.
Yes.
We did talk about that. So I think as a group, we think that, I mean, SWA is a placeholder for prioritization that includes, it's not just a desktop SWA, it includes field work and, you know, on the ground identification and then ranking and prioritization. But the big question, I think, is that issue of Bowser eligible activity of diagnostic monitoring. Is diagnostic monitoring an eligible activity? If it is an eligible activity, then we would definitely be considering that as one of the potential tasks under that SWA placeholder.
Yeah, if you're talking about eligibility, I mean, our policy is really open. I mean, you can't do certain types of water quality monitoring, but if you're doing site investigations and assessments, you know, so that's where, you know, it might be a conversation with me and Dan about what is it that you're actually doing. If are you doing something so just because you want to know how the water is, or are you doing something to help you with implementation? So for us, if it passes that test of you're doing something that's going to help you figure out where you're going to do implementation, then I think that would probably be eligible.
Mike, does that answer your question? I think it does, and that would make it so we could do what we define as diagnostic monitoring.
Yes, thanks, Jay, for bringing that up, and Barb for your response. I believe that, yes, I mean, what I would see is that, you know, we have a couple of priority areas that have already been identified through some previous work or SWAs and stuff, but I think that very critical to do some diagnostic monitoring, you know, sort of leapfrogging up through a system to identify, you know, with some real science, numeric stuff to establish, you know, sort of sub-watersheds within those sub-watersheds for a focal area.
Okay, so I'm totally wrong. So on page 6 of our policy, it says water quality monitoring, but it actually says diagnostic in there, not just effectiveness or routine and baseline. So according to our policy for FY 2021, diagnostic monitoring would not be eligible. I apologize for that.
Barb, could it be match?
Usually if it's not eligible for match. There are some exceptions to that with easement stuff. We could have a conversation of that, but I'd have to maybe run that by Marcy. But I mean, you guys only need to, if you lump all your funds together, you're only going to need 10% match for this.
Barb, could you define diagnostic monitoring? Because the stuff that Mike's talking about is something that is in some situations very critical for us to be able to actually prioritize.
Yeah, we can have an offline conversation about it, because it might be nice to bring Marcy into that conversation about the intent of how the policy was written.
Yeah, I think that would be appreciated, because frankly, it's really conflicting, because you're allowing one thing to help do targeting, and then you're stating then, at least intentionally or unintentionally, that a certain other activity that would help do the same thing won't be used, even though it would provide greater verification that it's an area of focus. So it's
just another tool.
Right. If it's a policy, if at the end, if it's a policy thing, I'd like to also talk to whoever is drafting or crafting the policy pieces and request a modification.
So this is Dan. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at that again so we could do it later, but that used to refer to diagnostic lake monitoring. So it might be a little bit different than what you're talking about. Maybe it's the term diagnostic that is causing the problem. So I agree with Barb. We would need to have some further conversations and then know exactly what you were proposing, so it doesn't
Sure.
cross that balance.
If we need to call it targeted monitoring then or something, then that's fine.
And just to give you guys a heads up again, my computer apparently is going to restart again in 12 minutes.
Nice.
I can't do anything about it.
Thanks, Dan. I think the issue is the term monitoring, because Bowser has had a pretty consistent position about not funding water monitoring. So if we can come up with a term and a description that makes it clear that we're talking about, concentration, pollutant concentration assessment using field protocols or something like that to make it an eligible activity, that would be helpful for this process.
And I'll say maybe on that. I mean,
thanks, Dan, for the clarity. I'm smiling, by the way. I don't have my camera on.
I guess I have a question for the group. I'm very interested in the SWAs. Is there interest by the group of looking at having one or two people really hammering out a bunch of these SWAs to get consistency and really start prioritizing the watershed early on? We can each do things individually. Some of us are doing this already on a local scale, but I would be interested in knowing the group's discussion as far as having one or two people that really can hammer out throughout the watershed, getting a lot of SWA work done, monitoring everything included part of that.
I think that would be great, Craig. I think if we have staff within the watershed that have an area of expertise and the capacity to provide that support, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, some of the diagnostic monitoring, or whatever the term we use for it, that Mike is talking about, if we have somebody who is skilled at doing that and can run around on call to, look at, flow concentrations from a certain tributary or follow those flows up a watershed, if someone who's good at that and can do it fast, then we can all save money.
So this is Mike Eisensee. I actually, my interest really is getting that SWA work done along the St. Croix. And I think that would definitely be a partnership, and we'll be definitely interested in working together to make that happen.
I think one thing that we really do, and we do have SWAs listed in our plan, but we need to sit down and really come, okay, what are people working on? Because I know my staff are working on several this year. Do we want to come together, have a central coordinate type thing? We're working together on these, because I would like to have somewhat of apples to apples comparison for our different SWAs. It would really help us moving forward for implementing projects.
Agreed. And yes, I'd definitely be interested in more of a centralized approach.
And if folks are curious about some of the SWAs that have been completed, they are linked in the plan, and a lot of them are, I think, just getting uploaded to some of the shared websites. So within a very short period of time, all of the completed ones should be available for download. Anoka's and Chisago's are currently on their websites. The remainder, I think, are going to be on the Metro Conservation District's centralized website.
So I want to quickly share this. I've been just rapidly adding up things on, potential reductions. So I just want to kind of talk through it and see if people have some creative ideas of how we can get to this goal of having things only adding up to 1.2. So what I have done, I said, what if we took out $75,000 from this amount, because we've got the first year of this position paid for. I said, what if we took out $175,000 worth of urban BMPs from this amount, took out $120,000 worth of ag BMPs. This is basically saying just we're funding BMPs, just not as many. Taking out a little bit of the wetlands amount, taking out a little bit of the landowner cost share for land conservation. Some of these things are pretty small dollar amounts. So, we could take like $10,000 out of this thing to work with LGUs to set view corridors, but that was a pretty small dollar amount anyway. And that's only getting me to 450,000, and we need to get to 600,000. So this is where I'm looking for some creative suggestions from the group if there are things that could be done creatively or could be funded through alternate mechanisms, or just some open conversation about what we would do to make sure that we could get this down to a.
I'm still confused about why we're removing 75,000 and not 125,000 from the shared ag position. Why isn't it just half?
I think right now, Karen, what we're looking at is trying to carry that position for 3 years, saying this grant runs 3 years, that way we have stability in that program. So then that would carry, we basically eliminating 1/3 of one of those 3 years, year 2021.
So I guess it's actually more like 83 would be taking out, not 75.
Angie, is the easement acquisition stuff, is that still in that budget that you're funding up?
Yeah, and sorry that this is a little putsy since the table's so big to like roll through the easement. Provide cost share to landowners for land restoration or easement. We have that as 140,000 on our wish list, and I was suggesting that we could knock that down to 100,000 based on people's thoughts. So that would get us part of the way to our goal. Basically, and obviously I'm not the one in charge. This is a group decision, but I'm just looking at, some of these things are easier to change the dollar cost for than others. It's easier to offer less ag BMP and urban BMP cost share and do less projects than it is to you remove a part of a person.
Can I just like throw something out there on that, like the easement and habitat? That could be a OHF grant application. So I'm just wondering, that might be a competitive application and a reason to just pull that out of here. Just a thought.
That's a good point too. What are the other, in addition to that, what are the other areas where we might be able to supplement with competitive grants? And yep.
Jay, I was just going to mention, that's one thing that's kind of difficult for me is we put together some competitive grants, and until Bowser announces the upcoming grants, I won't know if we're successful on a couple that I hope we're going to be successful with. That would have an impact on our funding requests through this program for ag or urban BMPs. And so I don't know that until probably December or January. None of us will. And that could have an impact on the implementation dollars that would be needed by an organization.
I ask a couple clarifying questions quick.
Yes, Matt, sorry, I just noticed you were saying pick me. Okay.
So for that urban BMP one, wherever it went, you took it away from me, but I'll try and find it on my other webpage.
Yep, sorry. I will reshare. Yep.
Nope, that's fine. I got it. So I guess, my first clarifying question is, we're talking about either 2021 or potentially through 2023. So very early in the process, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the second point would be, I guess I'm just struggling a little bit with the value that we get basin-wide on funding very small, $15,000 projects early in the process at the expense of some of those larger scale, farther reaching initiatives that would seem to have a much greater impact, on the basin as a whole, the river as a whole. I guess I don't see the value in, keeping that number high to do some of those small impact projects. I guess that's just my 2 cents, but.
Would the Would enhanced street sweeping fall into that category?
No.
I mean, I guess that's the question I'm asking. Is it the way that's written? It says, $15,000 a project. So to me, that just says doing rain gardens,
Urban BMPs, yeah.
which I guess I don't know that that seems to be not low hanging fruit to me. That seems to be kind of, hey, we've hit some of the bigger picture items. Let's start tackling this stuff. So I guess I wouldn't think so, Mike.
Yeah, I wonder, we just completed some further analysis and study with the University of Minnesota and MPCA on this. As you know, that with the City of Forest Lake, we've been partnering with them on doing this analysis. Extremely beneficial. We haven't worked out through all the numbers, but just on the sweeping alone, the loads are about almost twice as good as what we had predicted in our modeling efforts. In talking with the public works staff, when we take into consideration the reduced maintenance that they will have to do on sumps, stormwater, conveyance systems, as well as the extended life of streets, this becomes something close to a net sum zero practice. So it would suggest that this should be a priority for every urbanized area that is doing any kind of sweeping, and for any downstream water body.
So I am cognizant of the fact that it is 11:30 right now, and I guess I want to know from you all where you think we can and should end this meeting today, and what our next steps are if we're going to need to have a follow-up meeting. I can, kind of based on this initial preference thing, we can put together some potential scenarios for how we allocate the funding to get us to the right amount, and potentially considering the recommendation that Tiffany was making about taking out the land restoration one completely, maybe finessing the total cost share amounts for the ag and urban BMPs. But I just kind of want to, I guess, hear from people on how you're feeling about the direction that this conversation's going.
Angie, I think this is great. Can you take a second though before we go there and just check the chat, because there's a couple things that have come up.
So I mean, Mike Kinney is asking about the shared ag position, which we originally talked about that being an agronomist, and wondering if we're now talking about that being more of a conservation staff person. And then Jamie is just asking in the voting tool, he's just talking about the land easement thing also in the voting tool.
Angie, on that comment, before people leave today's meeting, it looks like they should convert any no votes to a 0 if that's their intent.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any dashes in the form.
At the moment, I think the only dashes are Emily, who, nope. I guess there is one
there
that
are a lot.
Tiffany
there
has.
are quite a few, yeah.
Okay, no, I guess I just didn't see the dashes until the end. They were, some of these last items here became dashes. Yeah, so if your intention is for it to be not funded at all, then convert it to a 0 instead of a dash, because otherwise it just doesn't show up in the mean calculation.
Or if your intent is you need to learn more about what that means before you can vote, we need to put that in the chat, because we can save the chat.
And then the next question is, how soon should we meet again to hammer this out? I'm the only one I can see on screen. Everybody else is just blank spots. So I just see myself going.
We're coming back. We're all here.
I'm like, hey guys, no, you're not going to make me decide this. I'm not going to decide this.
It seems to me we should do this soon.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 weeks?
My suggestion would be the planning team goes back or kind of takes the numbers, gets them back in order, pulls together the next meeting so we can have a report back to the PC on the October 26th meeting. So I think we should meet prior to that October 26th, the PC's meeting, the policy committee meets? And if we have a board pack could go out the 19th, we probably should have it be out the meeting the week of the 12th.
Yep. And that would give folks the opportunity, if they want more clarity about what some of these funding things would go to, that we can, as a group, kind of get some consensus on the definition of these activities.
Okay, so I am going to be gone this week of October 12th through the 16th. Are people able to meet earlier the week before, the week of October 5th through the 9th?
Yes.
I could. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And I can send out a poll to try to narrow down a date. Yeah. Okay. I guess in the meantime, like I said, the planning team can try to maybe, given this input, offer a couple scenarios. So maybe next time when we meet, it's more like we have 3 or 4 scenarios to choose from.
Angie, I'm almost wondering now that we have some input and prioritization, if the planning team doesn't put together a recommendation, and then what's missing for me right now is the next step in the work planning process, which is what is our deliverable for that amount based on our watershed or based on our implementation plan. So I guess what I'd like to see next is let's take a swing at actually getting the budget to the 1.2 million based on the input we received from the group, and then put more details behind each of those items of what the target deliverables are going to be for those funds.
That sounds good. That sounds a lot like what Barb is suggesting as well, to talk through each of the items and how they connect with the overall goals, so that much like Matt Downing was saying, we don't end up fully funding some of these projects that might be expensive but not very good at getting us to phosphorus reductions or water quality improvement goals. Okay, so I will send out a poll to try to find a date that week of October 5th through the 9th. If anybody wants to do any interim lobbying, feel free to email your thoughts. Any other verbal statements people would like to make before we all say goodbye?
So again, if you've got any no votes, Susanna, Tiffany, Twyla, on my screen at least, Caleb, fill those in before you leave, or we'll send you spam. We'll do terrible things like that.
Mm-hmm.
No, we won't send you jam.
No jam. No.
But Matt Downing might send jam.
Yeah, he might. He'll do that.
No jam unless you finish the form. So.
No jam.
My other comment is make sure you're thinking about the joint powers collaboration and the adopting the plan. That needs to move forward November, December. So if that's going to be an issue, please let Jamie or myself know.
Angie, are you able to save this poll that we did today?
Yep, the poll, it's on the interweb. So yes, that is saved. I will have the chat saved, and I've been recording the meeting. So yeah, so everything should be saved and accessible. Okay.
Great job, Angie. Thank you so much for wrangling us.
How y'all feeling?
Yes.
This polling thing worked really well. That was cool. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Okay, well, the sun is out, the rain is over, so maybe go have an outdoor lunch. Enjoy
Perfect.
the fall. Happy fall, y'all.
Thank you all. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
See you here.